Continuing with the 12th chapter of The Sword and the Stone by T.H. White, Wart has decided, as his reward for helping save everyone, that he is going to take Watt back home and see if Merlin can cure him. You'll remember from earlier, this is the guy who bit off the dog boy, who is also with them's nose. And Kay has got a Gryphon's head, which he has the dog boy carrying. And they've got Cully, the dog, with them, too. They had an immense reception. The return on the previous day of all the hounds except Cavil and the dog boy in the evening, and the failure to return of Kay and Wart had set the household in an uproar. Their nurse had gone into hysterics. Hob had stayed out till midnight, scouring the pluralities of the forest. The cooks had burnt the joint for dinner, and the sergeant-at-arms had polished all the armor twice and sharpened all the swords and axes to a razor blade, in expectation of immediate invasion. At last, somebody had thought of consulting Merlin, whom they found in the middle of his third nap. The magician, for the sake of peace and quietness, to go on with his nap-in, had used his insight to tell Sir Ector exactly what the boys were doing, where they were, and what they might be expected, and when they might be expected to come back. He had prophesied their return to a minute. So when the small procession of returning warriors came within sight of the drawbridge, they were greeted by the entire household. Sir Ector was standing in the middle with a thick walking stick, with which he proposed to whack them for going out of bounds and causing so much trouble. The nurse had insisted on bringing out a banner which used to be put up when Sir Kay came home from the holidays as a small boy, and this had said, "Welcome home." Hob had forgotten all about his beloved hawks, and was standing on one side, shading his eagle eyes to get the first view. The cooks and all the kitchen staff were banging pots and pans, singing, "Will ye nae come back again?" out of tune. The kitchen cat was yowling. The hounds had escaped from the kennel because there was nobody there to look after them, and were preparing to chase the kitchen cat. The sergeant-at-arms was blowing out his chest with pleasure so far that he looked as if he might burst at any moment, and was commanding everyone in a very important voice to get ready to cheer, when he said, "1, 2! 1, 2! cried the sergeant. "Huzzah!" cried everybody obediently, including Sir Ector. "Look what I've got!" shouted Kay. "I've shot a Gryphon, and the wart has been wounded." "Yow, wow, pow!" barked all the hounds, and poured over the dog boy, licking his face, scratching his chest, sniffing him all over to see what he had been up to, and looking hopefully at the Gryphon's head, which the dog boy held high in the air so that they could not eat it. "Bless my soul!" exclaimed Sir Ector. "Alas, poor Philip Sparrow!" cried the nurse, dropping her banner. "Pity his poor arm to brast in a green sling. God bless him!" "It's all right," said the wart. Don't catch hold of me, it hurts." "May I have it stuffed?" asked Kay. "Well, I'll be damned," said Hob. "Bent thick wool chappie, our wart must erst run lunical." "My dear, dear boys," said Sir Ector, "I am so glad to see you back." "Old chucklehead," exclaimed the nurse triumphantly, "where be thy cudgel now?" "Hem," said Sir Ector, "how dare you go out of bounds and put us all to this anxiety?" "It's a real Gryphon." "No, it's a real Gryphon," said Kay, who knew there was nothing to be afraid of. "I shot a dozen of them." "Wart shot a Raven. Better. He was very well. He felt very well indeed. Wait, I missed a page. So Kay said, "Wart shot a wyvern and broke his collarbone. We rescued the dog boy and what?" "That comes from teaching the young Hildy how to shoot," said the sergeant proudly. Sir Ector kissed both boys and commanded the Gryphon to be displayed before him. "Well," he exclaimed, "what a monster! We'll have him stuffed in the dining hall. What did you say his measurements were?" 82 inches from ear to ear. Robin said it might be a record." "We shall have to ride into the field." "It is a rather good one, isn't it?" remarked Kay with a studied calm. "I shall have it set up by Roland Ward," Sir Ector went on in high delight, "with a little ivory card with Kay's first Gryphon on it in black letters and the date." "Ah, leave thy childishness," exclaimed the nurse. "Now, Master Art, my innocent, be off with thee to thy Okay, this is the nurse talking. "No, Master Art, my innocent, be off to bed with thee. Be off with thee to thy bed upon the instant. And thou, Sir Ector, let thy thick shame to be playing with a monster's head like a godwit when the poor child stays upon the point of death. Now, Sergeant, leave puffing afore thy chest. Stir, man, and take horse to Cardoyle for thy shigagon." She waved her apron at the sergeant, who collapsed his chest and retreated like a shooed chicken. "It's all right," said the ward, "I tell you. It's only a broken collarbone, and Robin said it for me last night. It doesn't hurt a bit." "Leave the boy, nurse," commanded Sir Ector, taking sides with the men against the women, and anxious to re-establish his superiority over the master of the cudgel. "Merlin will set him if he needs it, no doubt. Who is this Robin?" "Robin Wood!" cried both boys together. "Never heard of him." "You call him Robin Hood," explained Kay in superior tones. "But it's Wood, really. Like the wood that he's the spirit of." "Well, well, well. So you've been a-foraging with that rascal. Come in to breakfast, boys, and tell me all about him." "We've had breakfast," said the ward, "hours ago. May I please take Wart with me to see Merlin?" "Why, it's the old man who went wild and started rooting around in the forest. Where did you ever get hold of him?" "The good people captured him with the dog boy and Cavil." "But we shot them," Kay put in. "I shot 100. "So now I want to see if Merlin can restore him to his wits." "Master Art," said the nurse sternly. She had been breathless up till now on account of Sir Ector's rebuke. "Master Art, thy room and thy bed is where thou art tending to, and that this instant. Old fools may be old fools, whether by yea or nay, but I han't served the family for 50 years without a learning of my duty, a flibberty gibberting about wi' a lot of want wits, when thy own arm may be dripping to the floor at any moment." "Yes, thou old turkey cock," she added, turning fiercely upon Sir Ector, "and thou canst keep thy magician away from the poor mite's room till he's rested, that thou canst." "A wantoning wee monsters and lunaticals," continued the victor as she led her helpless captive from the stricken field. "I never had the like." "Please, someone tell Merlin to look after Wat," cried the victim over his shoulder in diminishing tones. "Snifflings, indeed," they heard her concluding. "I'll give him snifflings." The wart woke up in his cool bed, feeling better. The dear old fire-eater who looked after him had covered the windows with a curtain so that the room was dark and comfortable, but he could tell by one ray of sunlight, which shot golden across the floor, that it was late afternoon. He not only felt better, he felt very well indeed, so that it was quite impossible to stay in bed. He moved quickly to throw back the sheet, but stopped with a hiss at the creak or scratch of his shoulder, which he had forgotten about in his sleep. Then he got out more carefully by sliding down the bed, and pushing himself upright with one hand, shoved his bare feet into a pair of slippers, and managed to wrap a dressing gown round him more or less. He padded off through the stone passages, up the worn circular stairs to find Merlin. When he reached the schoolroom, he found that Kay was continuing his first-rate education. He was evidently doing diction, for as Ward opened the door, he heard Merlin pronouncing in measured tones, "Sciant presentis et futuri quod," and Kay saying, "Wait a bit, my pen has gone all squeegee." "You'll catch it," remarked Kay when he saw him. "You're supposed to be in bed, dying of gangrene or something." "Merlin," said the ward, "what have you done with Wat?" "You should try to speak without assonances," said Merlin. "For instance, the beer is never clear near here, dear, is unfortunate, even as an assonance, and then again your sentence is ambiguous to say the least. What? I might reply, thinking it to be a conundrum. Or, if I were King Pellinore, what? Nobody can be too careful about their habits of speech." Kay had evidently been doing his diction well, and the old gentleman was in good humor. "You know what I mean," said Ward. What have you done with the old man with no nose? He's cursed him, said Kay. Well, said Merlin, you might call it that, and then again you might not. Of course, when one has lived in the world as long as I have, and backwards at that, one does learn a thing or two about pathology. The wonders of analytical psychology and plastic surgery are, I am afraid, to this generation but a closed book. He leaned back in high delight. What did you do to him? Oh, I just psychoanalyzed him, you know, said Merlin grandly. That, and of course I sewed on a new nose to both of them. What kind of nose? Asked the ward. It's too funny, said Kay. He wanted to have the Gryphon's nose for one, but I wouldn't let him. So he took the noses off 2 young pigs, which we are going to have for supper, and used those. Personally, I think they will both grunt. A ticklish operation, said Merlin, but a successful one. Well, said the wart doubtfully, I hope it will be all right. What did they do then? They went off to the kennels together. Old Wat is very sorry for what he did to the dog boy, but he says he can't remember having done it. He says that suddenly everything went black when they were throwing stones once, and he can't remember anything since. The dog boy forgave him and said he didn't mind a bit. They are going to work together in the kennels in future, and not think of what's past any more. The dog boy says the old man was very good to him while they were prisoners of the Fairy Queen, and that he knows he ought not to have thrown stones at him in the first place. He says he often thought about him when the other boys were throwing stones at him. Well, said the wart, I'm glad it all turned out for the best. Do you think I could go and visit them? For heaven's sake, don't do anything to annoy your nurse, exclaimed Merlin, looking about him anxiously. That old woman hit me with a broom when I came to see you this forenoon, and broke my spectacles. Couldn't you wait until tomorrow? On the morrow, Wat and the dog boy were the firmest of friends. Their common experiences of being stoned by a mob and then turned into ornaments by Morgan served as a bond and a topic of reminiscence, as they lay among the dogs at night for the rest of their lives. And by morning they had both pulled off the noses which Merlin had so kindly given them. They explained that they had got used to having no noses now, and anyway, they preferred to live with dogs. And that is the end of Chapter 12.